So we are going to move on to welcome Louise McGrath from the UK. Louise is the Director of Programs for ESTHER Partnerships for Global Health. And I just want to say how grateful we are to ESTHER as ESTHER Ireland for your incredibly generous sharing of the background of how we support health partnerships, how grants work, and even fundraising strategy. And we've benefited hugely in ESTHER Ireland from that. Louise is an experienced manager of international development programs and organizations with specific thematic experience in health and social development and on policy influence. She's worked across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and specifically spent 12 years in Brazil. She's worked on a wide range of international health with health and development organizations and institutes, and has a strong track record in partnerships, program design, management capacity, and she's originally trained as a nurse.
A long time ago.
So you are very welcome, Louise. We're delighted to hear everything you've got to say from that. So
thank you so much. Thank
you all for welcoming me so warmly, but also to the ESTHER Ireland group, to IGHN and to HSE for inviting me to share some of our insights and to learn from you all today and beyond. So I'm going to first of all focus on just giving a bit of background to who ESTHER is, because some of you may not be familiar with ESTHER, understandably. So ESTHER is a UK non-governmental organisation that focuses on health workforce development and the strengthening of the health system that the health workforce operates within. And we do that in a range of partner lower and middle income countries. And we do that through the health partnership model. So the model that many of you are familiar with, but for those that aren't familiar, I'll just give a quick overview, but obviously David and others have already given some insights to that. So that's partnerships between, in our case, UK health institutions and their peer institutions in a range of low and middle income partner countries. I'll start to use LMIC, but just wanted to make sure everyone was clear with that term first. And these partnerships are generally long-term partnerships between institutions that have evolved over many years to respond together to the priorities that have been identified on the ground. And they work on a variety of different issues and themes depending on the priorities and the expertise, including NCDs. In fact, we have a long-term programme in Ethiopia, which we're going to talk to you about. And they work with a whole range of different cadres, depending on the priority and who's involved in the partnership. Also, we can go on to the next slide. I should have said that earlier. ESTHER has a presence in 10 countries across Africa and Southeast Asia. And through our grant-making role, we've also been able to support partnership activity in a total of over 30 countries. And we're known in the UK, particularly for one of the programmes we previously ran, one of the largest health partnership programmes, the Health Partnership Scheme. Could you maximise the slides, please? Just put it onto the slideshow. I think it doesn't work on Zoom then. I'll try it again. Yeah, oh, fantastic. Hopefully that's better for everyone concerned. The Health Partnership Scheme, which Andrew Jones, who's amongst us, was leading for many years within ESTHER. ESTHER also plays an active role in the policy space, so the enabling environment both for health workforce development, but also importantly for health partnerships. So in that space, engaging with key stakeholders, both within the UK government and health system and sector, but also globally. We're a non-governmental organisation in official relations with WHO, and we've been very grateful to be involved in the ESTHER Alliance for many years, where we've learned and been able to benefit from the insights from other European partners. Through the work of ESTHER and the partnerships we support, we've been able to contribute to health workforce development and the training of over 100,000 health workers, and also contributed to system level change, including things like curriculum development. And I think it's really important to say that ESTHER is a really strong advocate and supporter for health partnerships. We really believe in the model and what it can contribute and what you all can contribute to bringing about sustainable, long-term, meaningful change. Just wanted to highlight that because we really recognise the value of the model. On to the next slide, please. But all of our work is underpinned by what we call principles of partnership. So these are principles of what good quality partnership working looks like in this space. That's both in terms of how to go about forming partnerships, how to maintain and develop those partnerships, as well as the projects that those partnerships deliver. And these principles underpin all of our work and the work we support health partners to undertake. We are also looking, I must say, to take these principles of partnership, or POPs as we often call them, to inform our work much more systematically internally. So we're looking at internal systems to really embed the POPs within all of our work. Next slide, please. Oh, I could do it, couldn't I? Sorry. Now, coming to the crux of the matter of what we're focusing on today, and I think so much of what's been said already really chimes with some of the points I want to make. I've been asked to consider what are some of the key challenges facing the health partnership community, and what does that mean for what health partnerships can do in the coming 5 years. So I've listed 5 top challenges. Obviously, there are numerous challenges. I'll run through one by one in subsequent slides. But what I want to do is draw out and speak about some of these challenges and what they mean for the health partnership community, but also some of the responses we've seen health partnerships adopt, and also some thinking around what might health partnerships be able to do to address these challenges going forward. And I'll be really keen to benefit from some of your learning and insights, and in relation to the climate point in particular, as well as others, obviously. And one thing to say, even though they're listed as 5 separate points, there is a relationship between those challenges, and a number of them affect others within that list. And I'll try and draw that out as we go through them. So I can do this one now, can't I? Just on. There you go. I didn't know which button to press, but there you go. Well, I should have apologised to begin with, or at least asked, but if anything I say isn't clear because of my English accent, do let me know and I can try and be clear. No, I think it's important to recognise that point. So in relation to COVID, obviously it's had devastating effects on societies across the world. But I think in terms of health systems, it's put a particular strain, both within Europe, but also in Africa and Asia. And the health workforce has borne the brunt of that strain. So we know it's really stretched health workforces. COVID has also really accentuated, and in some cases exaggerated, inequalities that already existed. So both within societies, we know that some sectors of society suffered more than others in terms of their response to COVID, but also between societies, we saw that the wealthier countries were able to compete for vaccines in a way that those that didn't have the resources were able to. However, we have seen that COVID has had, and there've been some mentions of this as well, some positive effects on how health partnerships might be able to engage. I think when COVID first hit, there was a sense, oh, all partnership activity needs to stop. We can't work because we can't travel to be with our partners. No one can continue to operate through this partnership model. But very quickly, partnerships adapted to find new ways of both working within their partnerships, but also adapting what they were working on. So we saw, for example, a partnership in Zambia that was working on antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship. And it was a partnership involving pharmacists. They quickly adapted to the lack of antibacterial hand gel in Zambia to together develop a formula for producing that hand gel. And that was then produced in the hospital in Zambia. And that model was so effective that it was then adopted back in the UK hospital. So a real example of that mutual benefit, again, that we recognise this model of partnership really does bring about. It's not just of benefit to the LMIC partners, but also to the European partner. Obviously, so much of the way we interact now has been changed by COVID. We're now much more familiar with working virtually, with engaging virtually. We know there have been limitations because of that, obviously, but it's also brought about some positive changes. So a number of partnerships were able to adapt their programs to provide training online, to develop new resources that could be made available to more people, and through the virtual mechanism, reach a far greater number of participants in training activities or in workshops, because people could engage from wherever they were rather than needing to travel to a common place. There are obviously limitations with that too. I'm not suggesting it's the solution, but I think there have been really a number of benefits we've seen from that. And certainly THET through this process has developed a number of resources and guidelines for using technology to support capacity development partnerships, but also a platform to facilitate engagement between health partnerships, so the Pulse platform, which is a little mention of down at the bottom. But also, I think importantly, another thing that COVID helped to stimulate was a change in the relationship sometimes and the leadership within health partnerships. So we saw that with the inability of the UK partner to travel, the LMIC partner, who may not have either been able or felt comfortable to take a leadership role, was suddenly required to take that role. And oh my goodness, 10 minutes remaining. You know, really, it propelled that leadership and progressed and really accelerated the leadership role of the LMIC partner. And the example I was going to use was one in Somaliland, where a long-standing partnership between King's Global Health Partnerships and Somaliland medical schools to support the strengthening of medical education. That partnership, which involved working with the faculty in those medical schools, in part to support the delivery of examinations of final year medical students, including the practical examination, the OSCE. Up until COVID, a UK volunteer would always travel out to Somaliland to support the Somaliland faculty with that, with the oversight of that assessment. But with COVID, that was no longer possible. The Somaliland faculty really rose to the challenge and now are confident to deliver that without the input of the UK partner. And in fact, those that have been leading that process are now going to be supporting other peers within Somaliland to roll that out more widely. Thank you. Next slide. Conflict, another challenge that it isn't universal, but I think certainly within a number of the health partnerships we've been working with, we've seen increased conflict in some of the countries. So in particular, Myanmar and Ethiopia are two countries where we've seen that through our work. And what that has meant is that the standard way that that partner or the partnerships have been able to work has no longer been possible. So again, it's been necessary to find new and different ways of working. So in Myanmar, as a result of many of you may know about the coup in Myanmar, which resulted in almost complete breakdown of the health system, and the health workers no longer engaging in that formal health system. On the UK side, the health institutions who had been involved in partnership activity with their peers came together and was able to facilitate that by convening that group of stakeholders. And as a result, there's now an ongoing collective group, the Health Partnership Community for Myanmar, I think we call ourselves, which isn't led by anyone. PHET plays a convening role, but it's not PHET's network. It's very much a collective group that has now been working together to collectively look at what are the priorities and how can those organisations work together to respond to the priorities. That's also meant that we've had a stronger voice in lobbying donors. So we've been able to secure some money from the UK government, but also we've had a stronger advocacy voice because we've come as a collective of institutions, not just one or other institution. I also wanted to flag up, obviously, conflict in Europe has also had an effect on all of us in different ways, both in terms of, obviously, I mean, no one can equate the horror faced by the Ukrainians, but I think we've seen that the attention of the policymakers and funders on trying to respond to the Ukrainian issue for understandable reasons has meant that there's less, in many cases, less money and less bandwidth to engage in other global health issues. Certainly on the UK side, that's very much been the case. So that's, again, requiring us to think about new and different ways of coming together to have a stronger collective voice to engage with some of those stakeholders. Thank you. Next slide. Both of those previous issues relate to funding and cuts to the international aid budget. I think it's great to hear of Irish Aid, which has obviously kept a very strong profile, but certainly on the UK side and a number of other European donors who we've secured funding from, we know that there have been challenges both due to COVID and due to conflict in Ukraine. And that, of course, has had a really striking impact on health partnerships. So PHET alone lost £50 million worth of, which for an organisation whose annual budget now is 5 million, that's a significant amount of money that was going to be spent over a number of years. But either way, it was money we'd secured to support health partnerships, to do great work across a number of countries. That was all cut because of the cuts. And of course, now we're all facing the cost of living crisis. And that's not just here in Europe, but also across Africa, Asia, across the many parts of the world, which means that we're also a little bit concerned about how will we be able to afford to run organisations and to deliver programmes. Again, there are no quick, easy wins here, but I'm really encouraged to see the workshop that's following this, which will hopefully give further suggestions. But I think what we're looking at the set is we need to look for new and different sources of funding from different sorts of potential donors. You know, we need to think about, are there cheaper ways we can deliver some of our work? I think this is where online, again, can play a role, because it can make some interactions cheaper. I think the importance of having robust evidence of the effectiveness of partnership activity is key to be able to really convince donors and partners of the value of engaging and supporting this sort of activity. And then that comes to the point of quality, and I'm really encouraged and looking forward to David's session later. I think really continuing to focus on strengthening both health partnerships, but also the projects that health partnerships deliver is fundamental to ensure that quality work is being delivered. But also I think that the Irish government and the work that David's been leading on quality and quality improvement, I think is so important as a key contribution that, that partners can provide to LMIC partners. I think that coordinated advocacy is important to see if there are, you know, coming together as a stronger voice to advocate to donors and partners, and looking at new or expanded partnerships. So I think, you know, building on the point that Anne made about looking at other organisations, Irish organisations working on the ground, you know, are there ways of linking up with others that will create a stronger programme and potentially be more convincing for certain donors? I think that's something to think about. Oh, okay. Climate crisis. So another major challenge facing us all, facing the globe, which I think, you know, we're increasingly seeing the urgency of this with the recent heat wave hitting Europe and the current floods in Pakistan. We don't have the answers to this, but certainly key questions that we think we need to consider, both in our own work and our work with partnerships. This is why we're really keen to get Anne's insight as to what can we do, firstly, to reduce our carbon footprint. So obviously reducing travel where possible and appropriate is one mechanism, but are there other ways we can try and reduce our carbon footprint as a partnership? But also, are there ways as partnerships we can try and address some of the health impacts of climate change? That's a question, I don't know the answer, but that's something I think we should be considering. And also importantly, through the partnership mechanism, are there ways that we can try and reduce the carbon footprint of healthcare, of health services? That's something I think partnerships can certainly give some thought to. Again, we don't have the answers, but really interested to hear from you all, and in particular on, you know, ideas there. Next slide. And last, very means not least, inequality, which I think those working in global health and international development are driven to address inequality and to promote equality. But we know there are still huge steps to take to be anywhere near reaching that goal. And of course, you know, what we know of the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matters movement has really brought to the fore some of the inequalities and the persistent inequalities that we need to consider. And that's also raised questions about global health, international development, and moves to really try and encourage a decolonization of global health and international development, to really try and redress the balance. I think some of the work that David mentioned in relation to the ESTHER Alliance, I think is really progressive, as it's, you know, trying to think about ways to restructure and change the focus, taking on board some of these reflections. So again, no kind of easy or immediate options, but really making sure throughout the work that we do and that we encourage health partnerships to do is to think about what are the inequalities, both within the partnerships, but also within the context within that partnership is working. And then working with the partnerships, trying to address those, recognising the imbalance of power within that partnership as well, potentially. VET has developed a few tools and training on these issues, which there are links at the end of the presentation, which you can see. Then the final core slide is really trying to just summarise the key points. So I think, you know, what are some of the key things that health partnerships can do to ensure the ongoing contributions to global health? And I think, as Anne said, everyone's already doing so much, so very much continue what everyone's doing, but building on some of that learning from the recent past as we look into the future. I think being flexible, adaptive and open to change is really a key message. I think we've all learned to be that more as a result of recent change, but continuing to be open to that and exploring what are the ongoing priorities on the ground. Are there different things we could be doing or different ways we could be doing it? I'm very happy to share these slides afterwards, by the way, so please. I think digital solutions are really a strong tool as we move ahead. Digital solutions aren't the right solution for every problem, and certainly not the only solution, but certainly in terms of potentially cutting costs, potentially reaching more people, and potentially reducing carbon footprint. They are a strong tool in our armour to address some of these challenges, but only where they're appropriate. I think we shouldn't just see this as the solution for everything. I think continuing to think about how to rebalance power within partnerships and to promote equality in those partnerships, and consider the contribution to addressing the climate crisis. Looking to seek new partners or stakeholders, I think, will be a key way of being ready and stronger to respond to the ongoing challenges. That focus on gathering and sharing evidence on the effectiveness, and really the key sort of final point, which again picks up on points others have made, really wanting to focus on that cooperation, coordination and collaboration. I think by coming together, learning between ourselves and amongst ourselves, sharing, learning from others, as well as coming together to have a stronger voice to discuss with policymakers, with funders, with decision makers, will enable us to have a stronger role in global health as we move forwards, facing these challenges. So just a few links there, which I'll say, share the presentation after so people can access those. But now really just to say, first of all, thank you very much indeed. And to ask if there are any questions, comments, reflections, really keen to learn from you all and gather your insights. That's okay for me to ask questions, please. Yeah.
So is there anybody, we have just a little bit of time, tiny bit of time for any questions, any comments for Louise? Any thoughts? David, you want to come in?
Yeah, just well.
David, you can speak up loud. Thanks.
I mean, just to say that was brilliant, and you really struck a chord. Everything you said was exactly, I think, the kind of issues that we're grappling with here, and your description of the current situation, the current challenges we face, very much what we're experiencing here. So really appreciate that. Fantastic. I think there's lots of food for thought there, the way we work. I think the whole climate change agenda, I think that's a big one for all of us. Yeah. What does that mean for our partnerships? And I think the two things you mentioned, one is what does it mean, the implications for travel? Yeah. And I think one of the things we like to do is develop some guidance for partnerships, our partnerships around how to conduct partnerships in light of the climate change agenda. And the other thing is about how we can support countries in their responses. And a core part of our approach is to strengthen health systems. Yeah. And I think now we're talking about strengthening sustainable health systems, and we're bringing the sustainability agenda into our thinking. Yeah. And I think that's something for us all to think about, is how do we build that into the work that we do, because I think that's very important. Thanks for
fantastic. We'll be really keen to work with you and learn from you in this journey. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Anybody else? Any last comment? And Louise is also with us for the day, so very welcome. I cannot emphasize how much information, how much experience Thet have for any partnership. There's nothing that you couldn't learn. You could learn everything from asking questions of Louise and of Andrew, who's also with us today. Anybody else? Anything? Anne, yes.
If I could just, excellent presentation. Yeah, echo David. It's really, really good, very interesting to learn. Definitely, we don't have the answers that you're looking for, but happy to talk about it. But I did just want to kind of take the opportunity to re-stress 2 points that you made, and one in particular around about the digital technology side of things. And just to say, within the European Union Global Health Strategy, there's, and within European Union development cooperation, there is a very strong and increasing focus on the digital agenda and digitalization of, not of aid, but of, of all kinds of interactions. Yeah. So, I mean, we are, and Ireland is a digital society. We're at the forefront of developing a lot of research and innovation and technologies in relation to that. But I would also say, it has to come. I really enjoyed the fact that you caveated that. Yeah. You have to be, realistic about how fit for purpose digital solutions are in many different countries and contexts. And that again then just rolls back around to, you know, make sure that if you have an idea, if you have a journalism idea and a really good solution, get it out there, discuss it, make sure you figure out what is already happening, what has already been tested, tried and failed, so that you don't, you know, end up in the same situation.
Most definitely.
Because we have seen, I mean, the path is strewn with all kinds of fantastic, really good innovations that just never made it out of the phone and into use. The other point was around about, again, just the decolonization agenda. And I think, again, this pandemic has allowed us to just kind of go, oh, hold on a second.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a rebalancing here. So this two-way learning is, really to be pursued and referenced.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
No, thank you.
So much.
Pleasure. Thank you.